Looks cool. It's great. A lot better than what my wife tells me.
Do I look cool though?
You look great.
That's the question.
Yeah, that's
all right. Good.
That's the question.
I've never in my life been on a podcast. So.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Oh, heck yeah, dude. Heck yeah. All right, so for those of you watching, welcome. I'm just going to call this the Guidance Counselor 2.0 podcast, live at DevWorld. I have a podcast. I've been doing it for 5 years now, virtually, where I interview people in the engineering space. I call it like the soft skills of the engineering, the soft skills podcast of the engineering world. So I'm here with Aaron, fellow American. It's good to see you, man. Nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Exactly. So basically, the whole thesis of my podcast, I was telling you before we started recording, is around career job stuff, right? Would love to know just a quick background about you just to set the stage, and we'll dive into some questions. But if you want to go ahead.
Sure, yeah. I've been a computer programmer since I found buttons as a little kid, and have been pretty fascinated with it. Just so happened to grow up in a world where it became a good career to be kind of a computer nerd. Yeah. Been programming for a long time, got an internship out of college and never really looked back. Eventually got hired on at Nike, where I became a globalization expert. So localization architect is kind of the phrase that's used. So at Nike was able to be on the team that sort of created all the logistics of all the translations throughout their app, tens of thousands of words a day translated.
That's crazy.
So became a localization expert there, which was super fun. And so now I've kind of taken that on the road, so to speak, and I'm an independent consultant, helping companies understand the coding infrastructure of translating their sites and making some human-centered code and adapting to different regions and stuff like that. So that's what I do now.
That's awesome.
Pretty fun.
That's cool. So I am curious, right? People that will watch this in the future, they're probably like, man, you left Nike.
Yeah.
And now you're doing your own thing.
Yeah. I make way less money.
Well, talk about that, right? Because I think a lot of times, I always talk about you really got to pursue stuff you want to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes the money's there, sometimes the money's not. Talk about that step to step out of Nike. What prompted you to do that?
Yeah, I think the prompt was I became really passionate about the topic. So, guy in the tech industry, I accidentally landed in this topic of localization, globalization, and that was really the first time I came across a scenario where my job is to think about the human first.
Right.
And so I became really fascinated, not only from that perspective, but then linguistics, I find really fascinating, and then beyond all that is the technical side, like the Unicode consortium, how all that is architected. All of us just being able to text emojis and different characters, way that actually happens is insanely fascinating to me. And so I think what prompted it is just a passion to help other companies figure out what I did at Nike. Not a lot of engineers have the ability to work in a code base or hundreds of code bases that support 25 languages, 20 regions. And so that, and also selfishly, I want to be independent. I loved Nike. Some of my best friends are from there still. But there's always something about wanting to strike out on your own, and if you niche into a topic, then might as well try and make something of it. And so found some really good partners. I'm here with Localize, who's a translation vendor or a management system. And so, found some really good people in the industry to work with. And it's a lot of fun.
I love that. I think, and of course I talked about this is career stuff, but a little pivoting, even when I told you before we started. But I am curious, going out on your own, what are some things people should consider before that, right? I do feel like lately, with how the market's been, when I used to start recruiting in 2011, people are like, I only want a full-time job. Yeah. I'm never contracting. Now people are way more open to contracting and freelancing than they've ever been, because I really feel like in my opinion, the trust was a little broken from the company to employee around full-time over the last few years with how many layoffs and the layoffs that continue to happen. So what are just some words of encouragement, some things people should keep in mind before going out on their own?
Yeah, I mean, how are you with budgeting?
Yeah, I mean,
that would kind of be the number one thing. You have your money situated, you prepared to not really make a ton of money for a while.
Yeah.
I think also it's easier to be more interested in freelancing contracting when companies aren't hiring as much.
Sure.
So that's a lot easier. I think the days of the easy, money in the tech industry is kind of over.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. I would also, personally, I kind of think it's okay to think smaller. Everyone wants to make the unicorn startup. Yes. They want to make all this stuff, but hey, look around your neighborhood, see people have small businesses all the time. The power washing company down the street is able to pay their bills with their like small business. And so we in the tech side have access to technology that can like, yes, it can scale to an insane amount. And that means your local area probably has a need in a small niche that you can help with to like pay your bills. How about start there and then, you know, maybe sell for $1 billion. But I think that's kind of the advice I talk to people about.
I think another thing too, and I want to bring up and kind of softball this to you is obviously I'm sure when you go out on your own, you have to have a network. And you're at a conference now.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the power of networking and just showing up to these things?
I mean, it's a new skill for me, honestly. I started as obviously a programmer. I eventually became an educator where I talked to people about localization. And I never thought I would be someone who volunteered to go up and speak in front of people for any reason. And so I'm still learning the power of networking. Like even agreeing to do this is well out of my comfort zone. Never in my life been on a podcast. So
You're crushing about it.
I'm relying on people like you to tell me that the networking thing is worth it. But man, signing up for like going to dinner or all these events is well out of my comfort zone and not something I'm great at, honestly.
Yeah.
But in the, since I've been independent only in the less than a year now, I can see that there's like, it's a bit of a flywheel that it's really hard to get started, but once you're going, it becomes a little bit easier. And it's still like it's hard to make the decision every time of like, okay, yes, I'm in Amsterdam. I have like a crazy, layover, hangover pretty much. And like, yes, I'm still going to choose to be social. Like that's not easy. And I don't always choose to network, but I am starting to like over time see the benefit of that, keeping that flywheel going.
It's a muscle.
Yeah, it's a muscle.
It really is a muscle. Yeah, if you don't show up for dinner tonight, I'll be mad at you and email you. So talk about, I want to go back to one thing you mentioned, and I think it's going super niche, right? I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like your specialty is relatively niche.
Yeah, hopefully not too niche.
Right. But like, because I do feel like people say, like, I'm going to build the next unicorn. It's like, I think you can be very specific right now and actually carve out a really good lane for yourself. Do you agree?
Totally agree. Yeah, I hope that's the next wave of technology is removing the unicorns, removing upset industries. Like, how about make something for your local community and have them pay you $5 a month to do it?
Right.
And like that would probably pay your electric bill. Yeah. And like have that mindset and the small business mindset. I would love a world of like mom and pop tech companies. Yeah. And so that's what I personally hope to see happen kind of in the next wave of tech.
Wait, when it comes to when it comes to kind of growing your career, right? I mean, you worked at a big company. What has kind of been maybe your secret sauce, right? Like I feel like you just don't get to where you're at in your career without being really good. Maybe at some interpersonal stuff, being good from a business perspective. What are some things you feel like you do really well?
I think what I
brag on yourself.
Yeah, that's also something that doesn't come super naturally to me. I think just the ability to realize that being able to code, especially moving forward, isn't the skill. Like, it's going to be easier to write code for everyone. And so what do you have left when you remove the ability to like write a JavaScript function and use AWS? Like, all that's going to get easier and easier and easier, and that's no longer your edge. So what is your edge? Like, do you care about people? Do you like want to find a niche? Do you want to network like you do? I think there's a lot of directions you could go. Yeah. And I think if developers hold on to this mindset that like, no, my ability to write code is what gives me an edge over the next future, I don't personally think that's kind of the way to have a winning recipe, but more being willing to say like, all right, this is the reality I'm in. What do my skills give me an edge to do naturally? And then experiment, try things. And so I wouldn't even claim myself as a success. I'm doing the same thing. Like I'm trying new stuff. I've been able to build up a little bit of a consultation business. But it just depends on how you define growth. And I think I stopped defining like success or growth as like building this $1 million startup or $1 billion startup, and more just like, am I happy and are my bills paid?
I love
and
that.
Then going from there.
You know, it's funny you bring that up. My wife and I have had that conversation a ton lately, and I think like, and I've talked about it a lot too, and I've talked to a lot of people in tech who, by the way, it's really funny. There's people with VR goggles on behind you, and they're all like doing something funny, and it's just like the funniest thing ever. But like, truly finding happiness in a career like tech can be hard. It's because, I mean, we all have our acquaintances who are killing it, right? Like literally there are recruiters who make more money than me. There are people who have more speaking gigs than me. There are people who have way more followers than me on social media in the recruiting talent world. But I've kind of carved out my niche, and I'm very, very happy where I'm at, right? I get to interview you in Amsterdam. I mean, I'm very blessed. And so I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that, but I always tell people you can only make, outside of Fang, you can only make so much money. There's only so many titles. So it's like you got to figure out what you really want to do.
Yeah, you got to figure out what you want to do, or just be willing to kind of like take it as it comes.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like think ahead and say like, all right, I know I want A, B, and C. Think about the things you do know, and then like take that step. So like, all right, I know I want to be around people. That was something I learned, is that I used to think I wanted to just code in a basement and like not be bothered by anyone.
Yep.
And then it was a really weird identity shift to learn like, actually, I kind of like being around people and talking to them, which was new.
Right.
Say, okay, well, I have this niche. I kind of like talking to people. I love educating them about internationalization and helping companies with that stuff. I think there's like a lot of unknowns around there. So that's the step I took. And I might make a different one later. Who knows? But kind of not being so set on what you think should happen to the detriment of like what would happen if you were open to it.
Yeah, for me, I've kind of gone away. I used to be really big on like New Year's resolutions, right? I used to like write down all of these things. And it's like now I don't even do it. Because what I've realized is that like I feel like there are seasons within seasons of your life, both professionally and personally. And there's going to be times, I mean, in full transparency, I was a traditional recruiter for a long time. And I've been very open about this because of the way the economy hit in the U.S. I mean, I was making 40 to 50% less year over year because I was heavily commission based.
Yeah.
And so like my wife and I've had a lot of this conversation, like, are you happy? And I moved out of traditional recruiting because I was not happy. I wanted something more, and that hurt my paycheck.
Yeah.
And now I'm on the other side of it, and I'm in a very great position, thankful for Torc for that. But it's one of these things where like I was okay from I wasn't okay, but I was also in a way okay, and I knew it was going to work out because I was passionate about the new thing I was doing. I wasn't always chasing the money. I talked to so many engineers, so many people. They're like, I just want the bag. And listen, I understand you want the bag. I get it. But I've talked to more people lately who are more unhappy with their career because most of the conversation has been around compensation.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah, no notes.
Yeah, no notes. I love that. So in your career, have you hired anybody in your career or been a part of hiring? Just talk about that. What do people do well that you like? Maybe in the past, what have people really bombed that you're like, don't do that? Can you kind of shed some light around that?
Yeah, and I don't even know if I'm a great person to speak on authority. I feel like I didn't hire well. A handful of times I hired.
Hey, I love the honesty.
More infrequently than I hired well. I think what I've changed, maybe that would be more useful in my approach, is I was in a traditional big company going through the normal application process and like, all right, doing the leak code questions.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything's wrong with that. I think it's good to have like a basic screen. But really the best experience I've had is whenever I have been willing to say, hey, I will pay you a 3-month contract. Like I want to work with you extended or some kind of some period that makes sense for your company. It's not going to be the same for everybody.
Sure.
But like, all right, I have a project. I want to pay you, obviously going through some initial screening process, but like, all right, I'll work with you 3 months. And then like in 3 months, let's kind of reassess, see if it's working for you, see if it's working for me.
So much. Yep.
Yeah. And I went through that process with even Cal.com, which is a really popular kind of like scheduling company.
Yeah.
And I really loved that process, and I chose not to move forward with them.
Oh, you actually contracted with Cal.com.
Yeah, exactly. And so I really loved working with them a lot, and I went there, and that was kind of whenever I was deciding, like, what do I want to do with my life, and I was really passionate about localization. And so I started talking to them about that, and they kind of said, hey, happy to go through this contract process with you. It won't be able to be like fully localization. It's like, cool, I need a job anyway. And so went through that process and really loved everyone there. But at the end of, a few months, just like, yeah, I think I would just be better served following my passion. And so no hard feelings.
I love that.
And so that really impacted me a lot of like, okay, I'm going to do this indefinitely now whenever I have the ability to hire.
Yeah, I've talked about that a lot. I think companies don't use contract to hire as much as they should. I think, realistically, my hot take is I don't think you can really evaluate anybody.
Yep.
in a traditional interview process, I don't think you can evaluate the person as a person. I don't think you can evaluate a person as a coder within 3-4 interviews.
Yeah.
Even 6-8 interviews. I just don't think you can evaluate who the person is until you get them working with the team on something that matters. And so I've always been a big proponent. We always called it in the staffing world a right to hire, meaning basically like if both of y'all want to do it, it'll be great. But I think more companies should do that from an interview perspective. I think it's great. I think it doesn't waste time. You can work on a problem. The other person feels validated because they're getting paid.
Yeah.
And you work towards one goal. I think it's great.
Yeah. And there's, it's not a perfect system. Someone needs like healthcare or whatever. That can't necessarily work, but it feels like the least bad in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? What are some? I am curious. What are some mistakes you've made hiring? Because I'm really bad at hiring. I feel like I'm bad at hiring, but like, I at least I'm awful at interviewing. So like, do you have any? Do you have anything that maybe you are open to sharing that you kind of like shouldn't have done this, but in hindsight, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what you said. Like the process itself doesn't really lend you the ability to be confident about the decision. And like I always want to err on the side of like thinking of the best of someone.
Same, always. Yeah.
And so I would say my mistakes are just going through the process and having a mindset of like, well, this process sucks anyway, and so I guess I'll just choose this person. They like checked all the boxes, but without really like feeling it in my gut. And I can't say I've ever felt it in my gut by going through that process.
Right.
And maybe it's unreasonable to expect to feel it in your gut. I don't know. Yeah. So the parts where I hired well, I went through the same exact process, and it just so happened that person clicked in a bunch of different ways. And whenever I didn't hire well, it wasn't that person. It was just they didn't really mesh with what the job was, or I kind of had a misunderstanding on how they would interact long term based on a short interview. So I think it's the process that was the mistake. And it was just luck that sometimes that worked out, sometimes it didn't. Yeah,
that makes sense. So as we wrap up here on my podcast, I always ask every guest, if you could go back in time and tell young Aaron one piece of career advice, what would it be?
Career advice? I don't know. I think I feel good. In general, I don't think I like where I am, so I wouldn't want to like butterfly effect myself into somewhere that I'm not. So I think it would probably be to like not try to do the unicorn startup.
Yes. Okay.
That was just a lot of drama. And then I would probably say also just like don't code until you talk to someone. Like find someone that is excited about like, hey, could I make this thing for you? And if they're like, oh yeah, no, I don't know, then maybe not. So the mom test, I think, was probably the advice I would tell myself is to read the mom test early on.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Awesome. Well, thanks, Aaron. I appreciate it, man.
Great to be here.